Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world, commanded its legions, and held authority over millions of lives, and yet he wrote privately that the things men want most are precisely what enslave them. He believed the source of human suffering was not loss, not poverty, not even death, but desire itself. This matters to you because nearly everything you are pursuing right now operates on a hidden assumption, that once you obtain it, the restlessness will stop. Marcus spent his life proving that assumption false. In this video we will examine how Marcus Aurelius traced suffering back to its root in desire, and why mastering that single mechanism changes how a person experiences everything. If the Stoics' approach resonates with you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Somewhere between 170 and 180 AD, alone in a military tent on the frozen frontier, Marcus wrote in his private journal a line that has survived 2,000 years, that no man can lose anything except the present moment, because the present is all anyone ever truly has. Marcus Aurelius had every reason to consider himself fulfilled, because he occupied the highest position a human being could hold in the ancient world. And yet the Meditations are filled not with celebration but with constant warnings to himself against the pull of appetite, which suggests that the danger he feared most was internal. This is the first surprising claim. The most powerful man in Rome believed his greatest threat was not assassination or rebellion, but his own capacity to want. In Book 2 he reminds himself that the obstacles of the world are nothing compared to the disturbances we generate within. Therefore the enemy was never the empire's borders but the borders of his own mind, which kept extending themselves toward objects he did not possess. What this reveals is a profound inversion of ordinary thinking, because most people assume suffering arrives from outside and lands upon us, while Marcus argued that suffering is manufactured inside and projected outward. Desire, in his analysis, is the engine of that manufacture. It works by convincing us that the present is insufficient and that some absent thing must be acquired before peace becomes possible. This is why he writes so insistently about the present moment, because desire always lives in a future that does not yet exist. But this raises a harder question, one Marcus could not avoid: if desire is so destructive, why does the human mind produce it so relentlessly? To understand why the mind generates desire so compulsively, Marcus turned to the structure of what desire actually offers, which is always a promise rather than a possession. Desire does not present an object, it presents a story in which obtaining that object will complete you. This is why the Stoics distinguished so carefully between an impression and our assent to it, because the impression arrives uninvited but the suffering begins only when we agree with its story. Marcus writes in Book 8 that things themselves do not touch the soul, but stand outside it, while all disturbance comes from our inner judgment. Therefore desire is not a fact about the world but a verdict we issue about the world, declaring that what we have is not enough and what we lack is essential. What this means is that the craving precedes the object, not the other way around, because we are taught to feel incomplete and then handed candidates to fill the void. This is the quiet trap. The promise of desire is permanent satisfaction, but its true product is permanent motion, since each fulfilled craving merely clears space for the next. Marcus understood that the appetite does not seek any particular thing, it seeks the act of seeking. And yet there is something even more troubling beneath this, because if desire promises completion and never delivers, we must ask what exactly is happening in the space between wanting and having. Between every desire and its object lies a gap, and Marcus recognized that this gap is where the entire drama of human suffering unfolds. While we wait to obtain what we want, we experience a continuous low ache of insufficiency, because the mind has already departed the present and taken up residence in an imagined future. This is why he insists in Book 3 that we should live each moment as though it were our last, not from morbidity but because attention to the present is the only escape from the gap. The gap cannot be closed by acquisition, however, and this is the insight most people resist. When the desired object is finally obtained, the satisfaction is brief, because the mind does not rest in arrival, it immediately scans the horizon for the next absence to pursue. Therefore the gap does not close when we get what we want, it simply reopens around a new object, which means we have been chasing a horizon that recedes precisely as fast as we approach it. Marcus saw clearly that an entire life could be consumed in this pursuit, with a man dying in the same state of incompletion in which he was born, never once having inhabited his own existence. What this reveals is that suffering is not located in any failure to obtain, but in the very structure of obtaining. But if even success leaves us empty, then the most disturbing question of all becomes unavoidable: what happens to a person who finally gets everything he ever wanted? Marcus Aurelius is perhaps history's most credible witness to what happens when desire is fully satisfied, because he possessed nearly everything a human being could possess. He held supreme power, immense wealth, and the obedience of an empire, and from inside that condition he reported that none of it silenced the restless soul. This is why his meditations contain not triumph but a sober reckoning with how little external success accomplishes for the inner life. In Book 4 he writes that men seek retreats in the countryside, by the sea, in the mountains, but that the only true retreat is into one's own mind. Therefore the search for satisfaction in external acquisition is exposed as a category error, because the problem was never located where we were looking for the solution. What this means is that the man who obtains his desire and the man who fails to obtain it arrive at the same place, since both remain governed by the appetite that generated the chase. The Stoic conclusion is severe but liberating: if getting what you want changes nothing fundamental, then the entire enterprise of pursuit must be reconsidered from the ground up. Marcus did not advise renouncing the world or abandoning action, because Stoicism is not withdrawal. Instead he pointed toward a different relationship with wanting altogether. And this leads directly to the practical heart of his teaching, the one discipline that he believed could actually free a human being from the tyranny of desire. The freedom Marcus sought was not the absence of impressions but mastery over our response to them, which the Stoics called the discipline of assent. An impression arrives, a craving, a fear, a sudden longing, and in that instant we possess a power most people never exercise, the power to examine the impression before agreeing with it. This is why Marcus repeatedly trains himself in the meditations to pause and ask whether a given disturbance belongs to the thing itself or only to his judgment about it. He writes in Book 11 that we should strip things of the story we tell about them and see them as they actually are, because desire dies the moment its narrative is interrupted. Therefore the practice is not to suppress wanting through force, which only strengthens it, but to expose the false promise inside the wanting until it loses its grip. What this reveals is a precise method: when desire arises, we do not obey it and we do not fight it, we question it. The most practical implication of everything Marcus wrote is this: whenever you feel the familiar pull toward something you believe will finally make you whole, pause and recognize that the feeling of incompletion is being generated by your own judgment, not imposed by reality. In that pause lives genuine freedom, because the present moment, which is all you ever actually possess, becomes available to you again. Marcus called this returning to oneself, and he considered it the only acquisition worth pursuing. Marcus Aurelius traced human suffering to a single root, desire, and showed that the pain we blame on the world is largely manufactured by a mind that refuses to inhabit the present, always reaching toward an object that promises completion and never delivers it. His insight was not to abandon ambition but to break the spell that desire casts, by questioning each craving before granting it our assent. The practical implication is simple and demanding: the next time you feel that something external must be obtained before peace is possible, recognize that the wanting itself, not the lack, is the source of your unrest. The Stoics wrote for themselves, but what they left behind survived 2,000 years for a reason. Subscribe and we will keep exploring why.